Welcome to the Theatre Cooperative's webinar, What Matters Now, Building a Culture of Resilience in Performing Arts, organized part of IETM Multi-Location Autumn Plenary Meeting 2020. As I just announced, and it's also in the chat, the webinar is being recorded, and the recorded audiovisual materials may be used by the Theatre Cooperative and or IETM on the web and social media. Please make sure that you mute your microphone. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the program. You can share your thoughts and questions and comments on the chat. If you need simultaneous interpretation in Turkish, please click on the interpretation button below. And do not hesitate to contact the host and co-host on chat if you need any immediate assistance. Before we start, I would like to thank IETM organization for creating this unique solution of multi-location meetings. During such a stagnant time, this special way of meeting together inspires us in that although we are unable to move, travel, and act as we used to, we are in multitudes and we can communicate beyond borders and limitations of physical space. In that respect, this event proves to provide variety in case of limitations, multiplicity in times of stagnation. In such times of uncertainty and change, it is essential to discuss the ways to build a culture of resilience and emphasize the significance of solidarity. Due to the pandemic, the performing arts organizations in Turkey and the rest of the world have almost come to a standstill. This webinar aims to focus on the best practices in relation to resilience in Asian, Middle Eastern, and East European countries, which are relatively in similar situations to Turkey. As for the case in Turkey and our situation, I would like to first talk about the Theatre Cooperative, of which I'm the vice president of. Founded in June 2019, which is a very young institution, Theatre Cooperative is an Istanbul-based social cooperative representing private theatres, which means independent theatres apart from the state and city theatres in the professional field. With its unique organizational structure, it is the first of its kind in Turkey and the rest of the world, probably. Its main objectives are developing economically beneficial projects for its partners, collaborating with relevant authorities for legislative amendments, becoming an information and consultation center for Turkey's theater arts institutions, and ensuring the national and international dissemination of theater arts. Currently, Theatre Cooperative is representing 62 partners, and its board of directors consists of 5 theatre professionals, all of whom are managers and directors in their own institutions and theatres. Iraz Yöntem, the president, me as vice president, Ersin Umut Güler, Mert Fırat, and Muharrem Uğurlu, all of whom are working voluntarily in our board. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Theatre Cooperative has actively contributed to the resilience of theatre in Turkey, probably showing what we call now as best practice, one of the best practices in Turkey, by conducting negotiations with the Republic of Turkey Ministry of Culture and Tourism, city administrators, private sectors, and other NGOs, creating projects, proposing solutions, initiating and triggering events that help remedy the case of theaters in Turkey within an environment where predominantly there is an absence of a solid program and cultural policy by the government to help the difficult situation of theaters. Although we are a very young institution with the environment, within the environment of the pandemic, I can say that every goal and solution that we set out to solve and evolve our existence became our primary priority, which led us to unite and grow amount of time. So much so that at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 34 theatre partners, and now we are representing 62 theatre partners within 7 months in Istanbul. Our aim is to unite the whole of Turkey by ensuring the establishment of 7 theatre cooperatives in 7 regions of Turkey and the merging of these cooperatives in the form of an alliance. Some of our other achievements in this short amount of time, in which every day we feel the urgency of the situation and the need to contact and act immediately and in solidarity, are a successful
Günaydın Zehra abla, nasılsın?
Sorry. passed through the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, Directorate General of Copyrights, entitled as Capacity Building and Networking in Theater Management, a line of collaboration with Istanbul Bilgi University Cultural Policy and Research Center to create a mapping of the theaters in our cooperative and in Turkey at large to strengthen political advocacy, uniting and opening a channel of communication and cooperation between different actors of the society is an integral part of the cooperative aims. And so far we have organized talks involving officials, NGO directors, different art sectors, and representatives, especially targeted towards performing arts. In collaboration with Enogar Art, we have initiated an idea exchange table with the participation of theaters, cooperatives, non-governmental organizations, and prominent figures from all over Turkey. We have also formed a team of lawyers from different backgrounds who are experienced in the field of legislative amendment to work with the problems in legislation and laws concerning the support given to theaters, definitions and status of the theaters, which was already problematic in Turkey before the pandemic, and during the pandemic it has become acutely more problematic. We started a collaboration with Brighton and Brunel University in England and Bahçeşehir University in Istanbul to work on the effects of 5G in the digitalization of theater as part of the Arts and Humanities Research Council and Newton Katip Çelebi Fund. In terms of political and social advocacy, we have met with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism. In our country, it's culture and tourism together in 3 different occasions to discuss the necessary measures and demands we as theaters have, sharing our solutions, suggestions regarding the problems caused by the pandemic. Our suggestions are partially realized. Our work and line of communication still continues. Some of the solutions and projects in this period that we have created are a fundraising project called Bizde Yerin Ayrı, Your Place is Special with Us, targeted towards the theater audiences, an initiation of a support program for private theaters, as I said, we are the representatives of. As part of the program, audiences can book their places in advance for the next season and support theaters, artists, and theater workers. And this way of doing project has been copied and replicated in other theaters too. Also initiating and proposing open air events for theaters to regional municipalities, city administrators, NGOs, museums, and private sectors was one of our deeds that we achieved during this time. Our suggestion
şeylerden biri oldu. Tiyatro çalışmalarının dijitalleştirilmesi,
a partial support funding for theaters through the Department of Royalties and Copyright. One of our demands in terms of tax cancellation and or deferral was a reduction of VAT on tickets, which was implemented by the government with 1% specific to the COVID-19 period until December 2020, which we aim to make longer after for the next year and the coming years. In the face of such a large-scale disastrous atmosphere, which attacks the heart of the arts, which is the performing arts, we perfectly realize that almost all attempts at remedy falls short. However, I believe that it is predominantly important to create utopias within such a dystopian atmosphere. These areas of small but large attempts in which we try to create our own utopias are of great value. In this seminar, I would like to call these utopias as best practices from around the world from our speakers. As Ursula Le Guin says in her book, No Time to Spare, every utopia, since utopia has also been clearly and or obscurely, actually or possibly in the author's or in the reader's judgment, both a good place and a bad place. Every utopia contains a dystopia. Every dystopia contains a utopia. And now, presenting valuable speakers in this panel coming from 3 different continents of the world, all of whom are activists, theater artists, writers, and directors. At first, each speaker will introduce themselves and also explain to us the current situation of the performing arts environment in their country, after which we will have 2 rounds of discussion centered around 2 different questions. So for now, presenting Arundhati Ghosh, the Executive Director of India Foundation for Arts, an independent grant-making organization in the arts and culture sector in India. In her essay called Mask On, Blindfolds Off, Surveying Arts and Culture During COVID-19 in India, she starts by saying, henceforth, perhaps we will refer to our time in this world as before and after COVID-19. This disease raging across the world has caused utter ruptures in our lives. It has also shown us how blind many of us have been to the structural injustices that have always been part of our world. So I would like to say welcome to Arundhati. Swagat hai.
Do you want me to share the first bit now?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Çok teşekkürler. Beni de bu sohbetin bir parçası yaptığınız için çok teşekkür ediyorum. Sözlerime başlarken tam olarak Hindistan'daki
that over the last 19 years, I have been working in this sector, working with India Foundation for the Arts, therefore giving me a vantage point of being able to see all across the country how the arts have been doing. And through the ups and downs that the last 2 decades have seen, this happens to be one of the most difficult times that we've had. It's not like we haven't had difficult times before. Political constraints, economic constraints, religious bigotry has been around in the country for such a long time, affecting our daily lives, and especially the kind of work that artists do. Our freedom of expression was always in kind of jostle with powers that be, I'm sure, as it happens across the world. And sometimes I feel that dictators are most scared of artists because we happen to speak truth to power. Having said that, COVID-19 and this pandemic has had its impact, and wow, what an impact it's had. I have tried to, it's a very short time, but I've tried to just like sort of, and I'm sure many of our countries face these difficulties. So I'm going to just share 7 key things that especially performing arts in the country are facing. First, there has been absolutely no support from the government, zilch support from the government. And this is incredible because it is the same government which either to peddle soft power with other countries in their diplomatic pursuits or to promote tourism within the country has always looked at arts and culture as one of its prime selling points. And then at a time of crisis like this, to totally abandon those people who were part of what you were selling has been incredible. Not just income and economic uncertainties of the sector, but also a very serious loss of faith in the system. Most artists are, of course, there's no support, there's no income, the future is uncertain, but many in the arts communities, performing arts and other communities, are also feeling totally used and isolated. The arts in India have always been very independent because neither the government sector nor the corporate sector ever supported the arts.
Dünya ne de hükümet sanatçıları desteklemez. Hindistan'daki sanatçılar neredeyse küçük müteşebbisler gibi kendi çabalarıyla ayaklarını
amazing innovations that you see, platforms that you see, networks that you see in this country has been created by artists themselves with very little help from outside. Our organization, IFA, happens to be one of the very few who are there that support the artists. And also we are very small compared to the need of a country as large as India. So as you can imagine, the pandemic has severely curtailed our ability, even our ability to be supportive of the sector. Especially artists who are there, performing artists who are there in faraway rural regions and not in the center of focus are probably suffering more. There are also, so there is this whole thing about let's move to digital, but there are lots of concerns about the digital as well. Of course, there are technical and aesthetic concerns about what is going to happen to your art form. But there's also this concern about access. In India, a large part of this community does not have access to high-speed internet or even to gadgets and softwares that can enable a very smooth and easy transition from your physical being to your digital being. And that makes it further worse for performing arts artists in the country. There is also two other things which are connected to the larger fabric of the country, is that artists are feeling a very strong lack of collective voice, and they are sensing a slight shift in how the society prioritizes arts and culture. There is a fear and a deep sense that after this pandemic, many other things, as we start coming out of it, much of the cuts are going to happen in spaces which are already have very little support for the arts. So for examples, in the huge education system, the arts and culture programs will be seen as something that can for now be removed and the money be made use of in other ways. So it will be the first fall. So society's shift in priority of how it views the arts is also going to change, and that's a fear. So I'll just leave it till there for now, and maybe come back. I'll come back with examples of what we are doing in our next session, next question. Thank you so much, Yasin. You'll have to unmute yourself, Yasin.
Thank you. Your main points we share in Turkey, especially no support from the government, basically, or very scarce support, and the society prioritizing other things instead of performing arts is one of the two things that we connect. And now I would like to turn to Kalina Wagenstein. I would like to present you Kalina, someone whose work has been effective in Bulgaria, one of our Balkan neighbors and friends in the east of Europe, close to our doors and hearts. She's the director of Art Office Foundation. Art Office is registered as a foundation for public benefit engaged with the promotion and circulation of non-commercial productions of the performing arts, theater, dance, and music together. It works with Bulgarian artists and their artistic production, and there has activities in Bulgaria.
Sanatsal
abroad. So I would like to say welcome to Kalina. Dobre došli.
Kalinaya.
Thank you. Hello all.
Merhaba.
Yes, my name is Kalina Wagenstein.
Kalina Wagenstein benim adım ve 14 yıldır bu vakfın başındayım. Bu küçük bir vakıf, daha çok genç ve yeni ortaya çıkan sanatçılarla çalışıyor, kariyerlerinin ilk aşamalarında olan. Onlara yardımcı olmaya çalışıyoruz, desteklemeye çalışıyoruz değişik şekillerde. Ülke içinde turneye çıkarıyoruz genç kumpanyaları. Ayrıca eğitsel hizmetlerimiz oluyor. Mesela dijital iletişim, pazarlama, proje yönetimi gibi. Kendini yöneten küçük sanatçı organizasyonları için yapıyoruz bunları. İlaveten profesyonel sanatçılarla da engelli olanlarla, özellikle sağır olanlarla çalışıyoruz ve kıdemli oyuncularla. Çünkü çok önemli olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Çok iyi kariyerleri olmuş insanların hala sahneye çıkmak isteyip de artık talep görmeyenleri için sahneye çıkmanın çok önemli olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Yani 3 ana grup bunlar çalıştığımız. Ana grup genç sanatçılar, sonra engelli sanatçılar, sonra da ileri yaştaki oyuncular. Önemli olan şey bizim için felsefemiz şu. Aslında
So in order to keep on track, we are applying ourselves to different funding bodies so that we can provide all those services to the artists free of charge. So as you can imagine, as an agent, this year was extremely difficult for us, but it's not only for the staff, but mainly for the artists we are working with, because actually all the even the cultural events in Bulgaria were closed before the lockdown, even earlier. So all the venues were closed from the beginning of March, while the restaurants were working another month or so. What was really important is that all the state-owned and municipally owned theaters, they secure the salaries of all their teams, while the independent sector will really set aside. Nobody really pay attention of what is those people doing, and the independent sector is vulnerable anyway, without any crisis, because they are not receiving a regular support. So they are working on a market conditions, and they are not very highly paid, of course, especially the young artists. So they have no reserves in such a crisis. They're practically with no funds. So that is why a group of cultural operators, including myself, we immediately formed a sort of a I don't know, a working group to a little bit push the Ministry of Culture to think of specific measures, crisis measures for the independent sector. Maybe I'll come back to the specific results later on. But the good thing is that even the process was very, very difficult and very long, and some of the measures are open only now, which means like 8-9 months after that. Still, it's a good start, and I think that we really pushed hard, and we had some good results.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And we will get back to the details of your work and your achievements as with your foundation in Bulgaria. And this is one of the things that we connect very closely, that the state-owned theaters and performers, or the people who are working in the state and city theaters, are regularly secured their support and regularly being paid, whereas the independent sector, people who are working with the market rules, which is basically in Turkey, all of the theaters are has to have a commercial status, no NGO status, basically, which is basically all of the theaters that we are representing right now are on the street, and no regular support and possibility of support as compared to the state and city theaters. So now we are moving into another speaker. In my personal work with my theater, Galata Perform, I have come across many writers and directors from all around the world within our project called New Text, New Theater. And Mikhail Durnenkov is one such playwright whom we have invited to Istanbul, and also had the chance to see the work he's doing in Moscow, where we were invited to Teatr Doc, which is an independent Moscow-based collective of theater makers, a very special theater for playwrights and directors, founded by playwrights Elena Germana and Mikhail Uganov in 2002, who both passed away in the spring of 2018. The theater was closed and opened again and again, and obituary for Elena in The Guardian celebrated her life and achievements, saying, "She became a public voice to be reckoned with, a sane and measured advocate for freedom of speech and compassion for the oppressed." And now one of the leading figures of new drama in Russia, who was also a part of this independent scene in Moscow, is here to give us a picture of Russia in such times of hardship. Dobro Pajlavis. I hope I could pronounce that well. Okay. Mikhail.
Спасибо. Thank you for inviting me. Hello all. I'm Mikhail Durnenkov. I'm a playwright and teacher, and I'm the art director of the Lubimovka Festival of Young Playwrights, which has existed since 1991. It's the biggest and oldest playwright festival in Russia. This is a collective project led by a group of playwrights on a volunteer basis. For 30 years, 4 such teams have changed, and now we are passing the festival into the hands of 5th generation of art directors. We are an independence team, and in Russia, this means independence from the state and state support. This is our conscious choice, because only in this way we can save the freedom of speech, which is so important for creativity in general and for playwrights. I must say that most of all the theaters in Russia are states, but the number of precarians working for these theaters is a really lot. The authorities in the first wave of the pandemic supported state theaters. All employees kept their salaries during quarantine, but now the second wave is approaching, and the Russian economy, you know, it's like a person in Zoom meeting. Upper the belt, he's wearing a jacket. Below the belt, he has no pants. During the first wave of lockdown, it was possible to receive support for independent entrepreneur. I am, for example, independent entrepreneur, and mothers with small children, it was about $100 a month. The last but not the least, the rent for spaces was on lowest line. Now it seems to me we are approaching the second wave of the pandemic. An extraordinary 2-week school vacation in Moscow began today, right now. The authorities are trying to make sure that people in big productions and in retail trade continue to work, because the second lockdown threatens to collapse the economy. So that's our situation now.
One of the points maybe I can talk about in terms of Russia and Turkey, the common point would be freedom of speech. Yeah. Most of the independent theaters, the people, the playwrights, the directors who are working in the independent theaters are sharing the same thing, that they can express themselves. So this is our conscious choice too. So now I can maybe move on to Hanan Hajali. In an interview, Hanan Hajali, an activist and theater maker from Lebanon, talks about her groundbreaking performance, Jogging. I had the pleasure of seeing, as Jogging was created from a tremendous need to find the other pieces and inspired by true stories of contemporary Lebanese medias. Mentioning also that the main character in her play is the city of Beirut. As we were stricken by the news about the devastating explosion in her city of Beirut, in such a difficult time of the pandemic, I would like to welcome Hanan. And I would like to say welcome in Arabic, Ahlan bikom.
أهلا وسهلا أهلا وسهلا بكم مرحبا. Just I want to mention that I'm hearing very noisy effects on I don't know, radio waves or something like that. Somebody has to maybe to turn off his or her mic. I don't know. It's very, very annoying. I don't know from where it's coming. I'm still hearing that. It's like the noise of the city. I don't know. Anyway. Marhaba, I'm Hanan Hajali. I'd like to call myself an artivist, which means artist and activist, because from the beginning I choose theater as a factor, immense, tremendous factor of change. I discovered theater thanks to the war. While I used to be in shelters, I used to be at that time to be studying biology, but when I discovered the power of theater, turning the very sad shelters into a big celebration of solidarity, I decided to make theater. And from that time, I've been an actress, writer, researcher, and activist. And just to mention that I am a founder member of 3 of the most active pan-Arab institutions in the Arab world, which are Cultural Resource, Itijahat Independent Culture, and Action for Hope. I will be sharing the websites with you later. And just to now to profit from the 3 minutes to tell you the situation nowadays in Lebanon. Theater critic Eric Bentley defines theater by saying it's A leading B to C, C being the audience. Here and now in Beirut, the audiences, the multitude are not only no longer there, but has turned into viewers witnessing a crime against humanity. Beirut, a city that until a year ago was concentrating the basic artistic and cultural vitality of the Arab region, is now almost in ruins. The living and dead residents of the city have joined the 17,000 kidnapped and missing people since the civil war, and we all together turn to be that ghost, wandering in the fog of consciousness, claiming not only for justice, but for revenge against the perpetrator, represented here by the virus of the deadly Lebanese rulers. There is no doubt that we inherited a sectarian system whereby the state of Lebanon have been, for decades ago, governed by warlords who keep exploiting national resources via an increasing corrupted ruling system. So the so-called democratic system in Lebanon is in fact kleptocracy, plutocracy, oligarchy, name it as you wish. We can compare the Lebanese crisis to Russian puppets. Whenever we uncover a crisis, complex crises unfold to us. Over the last 18 months, Lebanese have had to deal with a dizzying series of events combination. First, the revolution of 17th of October, manifested by anti-government protests and demonstrations. Second, Lebanon's economic collapse, total collapse. Third, the lockdown due to coronavirus restrictions. And last but not least, the unimaginable blast of the 14th of August at Beirut's port. As a consequence of the criminal explosion, many neighborhoods were completely destroyed. More than 200 dead, 1,000 wounded, dozens missing. More than 300,000 of people are homeless. 100 of art and cultural spaces totally or partially destroyed. The explosion propelled the Lebanese into a parallel lifetime. So no need to tell that we are far away from precarity. And we are not talking here neither about resilience nor about survival. We may be talking about survival of survival. And in this case, I do not know how useful it is to mention quantitative statistics relevant to the current situation of the performing art environment in Lebanon. Researcher and writer Joe Bahout says, the blast is a condensated metaphor of the criminal negligence of the public authorities before the blast, during the blast, and after the blast. It is the explosion of a post-civil war system. Sarah El-Yafi, a public policy and political expert, adds, the blast was a crime against humanity, and the problem in Lebanon is no more a geopolitical problem. This is no longer a protest for rights. It is a moral and ethical problem. Thank you.
Thank you, and condolences for all the people who lost their lives and for Beirut. And of course, we have many things in common with Lebanon, especially the collapse of the Lebanon economy, which you said happened before the pandemic. We also have, also have a very unstable economy, let's say. And during the pandemic, of course, all of these problems with economy and everything related to theater and economy have become more acute. Thank you, Hanan. And now we are turning to our last, but not least, speaker, Mike van Graan. A very special person from another part of the world, namely South Africa, Cape Town. Mike van Graan, who's an award-winning playwright and who's also the founder and director of STAND, Sustaining Theater and Dance Foundation, an independent, not-for-profit foundation that supports the creation, distribution, and appreciation of contemporary South African theater and dance. Welcome, and I would like to say Dumalang.
Thanks very much, Yasim. You really learned Dumalang in a very short space of time. So as you mentioned, my name is Mike van der Graan. I essentially work as a playwright in South Africa, but also in the area of cultural policy. And I also have the privilege of working with the Atelier for Young Festival Managers based in Brussels, but which has an international remit, basically bringing together people from around the world who run festivals and then being trained in how festivals can mitigate or engage with the contemporary issues of the day, such as climate change. And the most recent one that we had dealt with new business models for the emerging ways in which festivals are trying to sustain themselves into the future. So that's just by virtue of individual background. With regard to the pandemic and its impact on the performing arts in our country, South Africa has the distinction of being in the top 10. In fact, we're the 10th most, we're the country with the 10th most cases of coronavirus infection, about 670,000. We are also across the African continent, probably the country with the most infections. Scientists are kind of confused as to why it is that Africa has not been as devastated by the coronavirus pandemic as other countries and regions. People kind of expected that given the levels of poverty and the proximity with which people live on our continent, that the virus would have a much more significant impact, but that does not seem to have been the case. So thankfully, for this time, Africa has been spared. So any Europeans who'd like to migrate to Africa, you'd be more than welcome. Just kidding, stay where you are. So in terms of what it's meant for the performing arts in our country, it kind of resonates with what previous speakers have said. So I'll speak a little bit about what it's meant for me personally. As a playwright, there were about 4 different productions that have been done of different plays of mine. And all of those plays basically had to be shut down, including a new commission that I had from the Fugard Theatre. Fugard Theatre is one of our theatres that has been named after probably the country's foremost playwright, Ethel Fugard. And I was commissioned to do a new play for celebrating their 10th anniversary as the Fugard Theatre. Of course, that play had to be cancelled. And in fact, the Fugard has now been shut down indefinitely and will only reopen once basically a vaccine is in place that will make audiences kind of feel they're not taking a risk going out. The virus has kind of also shown just how unequal our society is generally, but also within the theatre space, within the dance and theatre space, the levels of inequality within our sector. Also, there has been public funding that has been made available to support the arts, but the problem is that the funding has been made available to people classified as workers, and most people in the performing arts are independent contractors, so don't qualify for the public funding that has been made available by virtue of being independent contractors, which is one of those anomalies of legislation. I think that's kind of like the main items that might be different to what everyone else has said. So I'll just leave it there by virtue of introduction at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And the problem with being independent, the positive sides and the negative sides are common, I think, for all of us. And this is the case for South Africa. And we should really consider then moving to South Africa, Cape Town. It's a place that I want to visit anyway. But you should check the levels of, pandemic in our country before you call for that. Okay, thank you. Now, then we can move to our first round of questions, which is, what is your perspective on resilience and survival in the performing arts sector, which we started to answer a little bit with our introduction and presentation. Can you give examples from your experiences and talk about the good practices in your country, meaning what are your utopias in your country? What are the utopias, current utopias of your world, let's say? Thank you. And so we can start with the same succession of speakers. And Arundhati, you can start maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Yasin. I'll straight dive into it because we have very little time. I want to begin by saying that the first couple of months was spent by the sector totally under paralysis because we realized everything had stopped and nobody was helping us. So all of us were engaged in either relief work or raising funds for the arts. I know at least 50 or 60 of my close friends who are artists and in the performing sector were engaged in some form of fundraising for artists who are really in bad conditions, as well as and who had fallen ill for their medical treatment, and those we needed to do because obviously the government wasn't doing anything. But after that, things started to, and as artists, you know, I often feel it's like yeast in dough, that with time, things start rising and things start catalyzing itself into new ideas. So now what we have is, and as I look around for this presentation, experiments, I'm going to share 5 experiments. I don't want to call them best practices yet, because who knows? These are just things we are doing right now to keep standing where we are, to keep ourselves creative as we want to, and to continue to survive. And as Hanan said so beautifully, the survival of survival itself is in question. So this is one example. Studio Tamasha was a performance studio which allowed for not just their own performances, but they invited performances in Bombay. It's a small independent space. And what they have been doing is they have created a beautiful digital space, taking everything that they were doing in the physical space onto this space. And as in some of these images you can see, the artists have created their own safe booths to record things. The first one, the picture shows you Sunil and Sapan who hold this place together. The next one is of artists right now recording work and putting it up there. And they're ticketing these events so that artists can get money and this can continue. So this is exploring digital space. This is one very interesting experiment. This was a physical theater, sort of in the round sort of theater, done by Vivek Madan and directed by Kwasar, called Every Brilliant Thing, about a little boy who grows up with a mother who has mental illness. And it's a very sensitive play. And what they did is essentially they recreated the whole atmosphere of engagement and interactivity online in a Zoom format, and which was really brilliant. I wrote a short review for it and I can send you the link to it later. But these are also experiments that are happening. This one is a total insane idea. So Rupali and Pradeep are both theater makers out of a small a city called Pune. And what they have been doing is they've used this entire time of lockdown and no theater activity in actually pulling in their savings and creating this space called The Box, which now is waiting to be inaugurated by actually people coming in there and performing. It's a physical resource. It's going to be a sort of a big black box kind of space for performances. And they've used all their time to build this. The next one is also important. These are people from a theater group called Tadpole and their friends in Delhi. And they had realized that theater is not coming back soon. So they have used creating new things. And one of the things that they played with is, and I have the YouTube link here, it's a beautiful piece, but it is in an Indian language, Hindi, one of our many languages. Asmanjas is a radio play. And they have used all the skills that you need in theater, which is script writing, sound. Sound plays a very important role in this piece. And so there are lots of artists who are also using this time to experiment with new forms, like this one, a theater group, actually people in theater making us play for online. this is yet another exemplary idea, I think. Two artists, Shubha Mudgal and Anish Pradhan, both classical musicians. They feel that a lot of young musicians were really insecure during this time because all the concerts had stopped. So they were doing a lot of live performances just free of cost like that on social media. And this was just increasing their insecurity because everybody is wondering where's the money going to come from. So they created a platform online called Gift a Concert. So say I have my mom's birthday coming up, and instead of giving her a sari or jewelry or a book, what I could do is I could buy a concert from here. All the artists are there, little snippets of their kind of repertoire is given there, and the price is mentioned. So for a half-an-hour concert, this much, and for a 1-hour concert, this much. And I can actually buy a custom-made concert for my mother for her birthday. So this is an idea that they have just launched. And it is not only supporting young artists, it is actually giving them the confidence to sort of continue working at a time when work itself seems to be something that they have been really, really worried about. Two things I want to end with. One is that, you know, in a recent interview, our Prime Minister said that, oh, you know, India needs to be self-reliant. Probably what he does not know or understand is that people in the arts sector, people in civil society have always been self-reliant. We really don't need his advice on that because there's been very little help that has come from the governments in any case. And the independent sector, in fact, has always strive to stay together. And I'll talk about some of these solidarities in the next question. So it's not new for us. It's just that the pandemic was so sudden that it got us in the first couple of months. But most of the performance sector in India is now sort of coming back together. You can see a sort of new hope. We're trying to work together. So that's quite hopeful, actually. And the important thing is that the few supporters who are there, like our organization and a few others, must stay true to our cause. We cannot abandon artists at this time. And that is my plea to all independent supporters of arts and culture everywhere possible, whether you're a foundation, trust, or you're an embassy, or you're an individual who supports the arts. This is the time to support it. All of us went back to the arts during the lockdown. All of us were enriched by the arts during the lockdown. It was the place we went to celebrate and grieve. So we have to, this is the time to give back to it. And we have to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Arundhati, and exploring digital space, building physical space, enabling new opportunities and new ways of coping, not abandoning the arts, especially from the artist side and also from the other sectors. To hang on to arts is very important. Okay, now we are moving to Kalina for the same question. Thank you.
Yes, I think Arundhati said something very important in the beginning. It was that this crisis just showed us all the shortages and problems that we already have. And I have the tendency to think of this crisis as a magnifying glass. I have the impression that everything that we knew but we didn't talk about too much just show up in such a way that we should talk about it. So there is this cliche that you should think of the crisis as an opportunity, but I think that in this particular case, it is the case. This is an opportunity for us to think a little bit more about where we are, where we stand, and where we want to go. And how to do it together. So I told you before that a group of cultural operators formed this community of pressure to the Ministry of Culture and asking them to do something about the independent sector. But what was really important that we we initiated a Facebook group in which we invited all the independent artists, both individuals and small companies, to join the group and to just, that we all talk about what we exactly need, what we need in this exact moment. So this group is still existing, that they have, I think, more than 2,500 members, which for a small country as Bulgaria is a quite big number. So this group actually is our, how to say, our rear guard. So this is the group which is, because we are like 10 or 15 people in this process, in this discussion with the Ministry of Culture, but we have those 2,500 people behind us, and we are sharing everything with them. So this is, for me, it's a very important process, and it's not only what we achieved towards the Ministry of Culture, but also what we are sharing in this group, because some of those people, they never applied for projects before. They were happy to work on a market rules, while now the market practically doesn't exist. So they need to learn new skills and to learn how to work in such circumstances. So what is very, for me, what is very important is that the Ministry of Culture, during this very, very complex process, actually launched 3 brand new initiatives, 3 brand new grant schemes. And for the first time ever, there are grant schemes for individual artists, because before there were some things, not big and not enough, but still something for the organizations. Never the Ministry of Culture thought of the individual artist as a stakeholder or as a possible applicant. So now we had two schemes. One was really a crisis measure. This was for the people who had the lower revenues, lowest revenues last year, which means people who has no reserves to meet 3 or 5 or 6 months of lockdown. So for them, there was a special scheme for giving them three salaries, 3 minimal salaries for 3 months, which is not big enough, but still it's something, it's a help. And I think 1,200 people got this money already. And another 2,500 are applying now to another scheme, which will be for digital projects, small digital projects for individual artists. So I think that this will form a sort of a stock of possible ideas, some of which maybe will become a bigger projects later on. But for me, this has at least 2 aims. One is an immediate financial help for the artists, but also it's not just giving you some money for this, but we are supporting your creative thinking, and you have to come out with a small digital project with the tendency to make it bigger if possible, and put together more people. And now finally we have for the first time structural support for cultural organizations, a yearly scheme, which we are talking about like 10 years. And thanks to this situation, finally the independent cultural organizations in Bulgaria will have for the first time a structural support for the administrative costs, for the rent of office, for having paying salaries to few people. So it's really new for us.
Great. We are learning a little bit of our schedule, so I have to cut you now. But 3 great improvements in Bulgaria. The last one especially is not possible in Turkey right now. We are also working on that to create that. And all with this solidarity, I think, that you created underneath the Facebook group and your negotiations with the government. So we are moving to Mikhail Durnankov now for the first question. What is your best practice example during this in terms of resilience?
Yeah, we have some examples, but not enough. I think in such conditions, the authorities will not remember about independent artists, who is a really dark material in our economy. And that means it's our business to figure out how to survive. There is in Russia, time to time, that independent artists create some internet community for supporting them. And for example, in internet community called Artists on Fire, all the precarious lay out an offer for their work, offering a price for it themselves. This is kind of free market where you can find something good seller for your theater group, or teacher for webinar, or just funny. For example, one well-known writer suggested writing a memorial speech for anyone who wants to. A lot of people wishing to order a memorial speech from him immediately. I think such a free markets without borders is a good chance for independent artists to find resilience in their exist. We also have a lot of digital performance, and that numbers are rising. I saw a successful project made especially for Zoom. It was called Take It Away Immediately, and told us about the Facebook moderation rules. That performance gathered 600 spectators from different cities of Russia every day. If you think that the organizers don't have to pay rent for the space, it makes an impression. But new forms of theater require new ways of selling. I think that sharing experience about digital production would be very beneficial for all of us. So that's all, yeah.
Thanks a lot. Artist on Fire, right? That was the name. Yeah, okay.
Artist on Fire. Mm-hmm.
On Fire. Okay. It was like a shared area of offerings by the artist, I think.
Yes, yes.
Is it on in the web, or is it?
And it's a community on Facebook, and it has a mirror, yeah, in internet. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So, okay, now our next speaker would be Hanan, please.
Yes, I share totally what Michael just said about the need of capacity building in all the aspects of digital knowledge and digital practices. We are really in big needs, and I read it in the text that Arundhati sent. It's really, we had a lot to learn about it. We are in big need of that, just to mention this. And also, I would like to say that the 7 points that Arundhati also shared in the beginning about the situation in India, I shared with us in Lebanon also. And just to add that the state has completely abandoned its citizens.
Şunu söyleyebilirim. Lübnan'da vatandaşlarını tamamen terk etmiş durumda.
Security, no food security, no environmental security, no cultural security, nor any emergency relief measures or plan. Yani not in this crisis only, but along all the 4 crises and all along the civil war. And of course, the last people the state think of, even in time of peace, are the people of art and culture. So saying that, I'd like to say that this melting pot of crisis in Lebanon made that we don't know what could be really good as strategy, as short strategy or medium strategy or long strategy. We were lost in the beginning, and till now, people, despite the coronavirus, are demonstrating by thousands in the street because they are so hungry, so felt left apart that it's really a matter of survival, as I said before. And that's why the main essential thing that we are doing together now is also this cross boundaries of artists, activists, thinkers, critics. The most important site that we've been seeing before the last military emergency state that was imposed in Lebanon lately was those hundreds of tents in the middle of the city of Beirut, where we could find a lot of speeches about legal frameworks or works of culture, about laws for municipality, about public funding, about, I can say that it was the burst of the rebelief in the power of good politics, beginning with building up civic critic education and knowledge and grassroots formation groups. Saying that, I would like to mention that by the time of the fall crisis, we've been now living this for 1 year. Little by little, there was the forming of new groups, sometimes by domains, sometimes as being only political, social, etc. I'd like to mention, for example, lately, that there is a big tendency of building up new forms of cultural cooperatives for cinema, for theater, for everything. And we can talk about this structure later on, because even though it's called cooperative and we are used to this term, but there is an essential difference about what we used to practice. And also, we begin to think about, we have to shift from reactions to action. We've been living for 40 years trying to cope and to react to crises, to wars, to explosions, to pandemics, etc. It's time to now to begin to base our strategy upon big lines of action, basic of what we've been living on during these days. For example, I like a lot the idea of free market without borders, and this speech, maybe you can refer him to me, Michael, this person specializing in these speeches. But I'd like to say that along with all these actions, we, for example, benefit from the coronavirus period in order to cross over the political and the geographic borders. For example, even though we are very close from Palestine, we never had the chance to see the Lebanese theater unless we are invited to an international theater. For example, by chance, lately I was invited in Minnesota theater, Gösteri Theater, and I saw for the first time in my life a play for the great Nizar Zabi. So we benefited from that period to organize a digital Palestinian theater platform by Al-Hara Theater, Hakawati Theater, Ashtar Theater, Aml Hlayhal Theater, and those performances were shared by many platforms all over the Arab world. So all of a sudden, out from zero spectator, we had thousands of spectators sharing this experience. Also, we had a very nice experience called the Radio Quarantina platform, which is an audio, musical and sound platform where theater people who don't like to really film their own performances and put it on digital platform, because theater lose a lot of things in that and we have to invent another forms. We began to write, to reinvent and rediscover the power of the audio sense, of the sounds, And here there is, of course, we all know the McLuhan theory that the medium is the message. So we rediscovered that, and I wrote some performances along with a lot of my colleagues, and the effect was fantastic. And lately, after the blast, in the middle of the rebels, performances, open space performances began to burgeon in Beirut. And the first one was called Jude. And it was fantastic to see again people mourning, but mourning in the wonderful ambience of solidarity and of joining up a power that the theater, only theater can make. And also, just to mention last but not least, that lately, only the Civic Society also came up with really useful ideas. And for the first time in the Arab country, we saw institution of arts clustering together, really stopping for being narcissists and clustering together in order to give grants for mobility, grants for production, grants for reconstructing the destroyed buildings. And till now, there is, for example, AFA, Cultural Resource, Action for Hope, Itijahat, and I'm lately formed with a number of my colleagues what I've been calling the Theater Relief Group. We are more than 120 people in Lebanon and the diaspora abroad, because the role of diaspora here is very, very, very important. And we have to really pay attention to this role. And we began to gather funds and distributing it to people. Until now, we really succeeded to get help to 1,000 people and theater spaces in Lebanon. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanan. In such a difficult time where there's as you say, there's a lot of a great anger in the society and an abandoning of the people. I think one of the most important things that you said was the crossover of political and geographical borders. And this will lead to our next question, actually. But before that, Mike Van Graan, please, for the resilience examples. Thank you.
Sure. Maybe just to mention 4 very briefly. The first is the emergence of an online platform, which is kind of similar to Netflix, but for theatre. So South African Theatre on Demand, where this bunch of young digital theatre makers basically have launched this platform. And we as independent theatre makers can locate our theatre pieces on that platform, and people can then pay a fee to download and watch our theatre. This has kind of been one of the big challenges of the last time. Obviously, people have gone online, many of them, but they've had great difficulty in how to monetize online kind of performances. Also, if people are downloading Netflix, our production values as theatre makers are in no way as comparable at the moment to what Netflix can offer. And so, you know, I think it goes back to some of the earlier points made by my colleagues here about the need to really improve our filming of the theatre that we are putting online in order for us to compete with other online projects. I think a second thing that has emerged over the last while in terms of the theatre community is the extent to which people have been upskilling themselves, both for this particular period as well as for a post-COVID-19 future. So I'm for the Arts, which is an online formation of theatre practitioners, hosted a winter school. And we thought we'll maybe get, you know, we hosted about 15 different courses, from budgeting for the arts to cultural policy to an introduction to theatre industry, to the film industry and the like. And we thought we'll maybe get 15 to 20 people to each of those courses. We eventually landed up with about 120 to 170 people per course, you know, over the 3 days. And I think there's a real hunger for people to be able to acquire the skills that they need to survive. And because we are constantly in the process of making theatre in order to pay the rent, or because that's what we are passionate about in normal circumstances, we don't do enough reflecting on what our deficiencies are and learning skills that we need in order to survive within this time. So ironically, this particular period has allowed people to do exactly that. I think a third thing that has happened over the last while is the extent to which artist organizations have emerged. Again, resonating with some of my colleagues on the panel. People have seen this as being an important time for people to work over their previous kind of divisions and to come together because it's in their collective interest to make sure that there is a future for the ecosystems of dance and theatre. And then the final thing I want to maybe spend a bit more time on is the way that you introduced me, Ekim. I'm a project manager for the Sustaining Theatre and Dance Foundation, which is a private initiative that 10 of us set up as theatre makers, as festival managers, and as dance makers, where we said, you know, forget about government. The last 26 years of democracy has kind of shown us that government doesn't particularly care for the arts and doesn't care for theatre and dance in particular, because within this notion of cultural policy that has emphasized the creative and cultural industries, dance and theatre are seen as entities that will always require some form of subsidy that cannot make it within the neoliberal policy of market-driven market sustainability as other things can. And so we said, you know, let's forget about government and let's find ways in which we can support ourselves. And so this is why we started this particular initiative, and it's very young. We've only launched officially on the 1st of September. So we're about a month old, but essentially the business model is we've gone to people within the dance and theatre sector who have made it to some extent and said to them, become patrons and donate a certain amount of money, which will give you a 2-year kind of association with us. And so we've raised quite a substantial amount of money from about 42 patrons. That's then invited, you know, international embassies to come along and say, hey, we really like what you do. Can we play a supportive role as well? And the big long-term thing is that we're going to go to an individual subscriber base. We believe there must be at least 100,000 people in our country who support contemporary dance and theatre. So to ask them for $10 a month, the equivalent of $10 a month, to support dance and theatre. But in exchange for that, we will also, on a weekly basis, provide them with access to unique events that they might not otherwise experience. So, for example, a rehearsal of a contemporary dance company, the reading of a new play, an interview with an international local director that they might not interface with and the like. So we'll offer these things to people in exchange where they're contributing to you know, Stand Foundation, and then we will be able to use the money for a range of projects. Already we've launched 4 projects. One is a stand-up comedy project for women. So it's called Stand Up for Women, playing on the notion of stand, particularly in this notion, in this era of gender-based violence and the like. And we've identified 8 new potential stand-up women comics who are working on material now to create a show by the end of October. We've launched a new discussion document and a vision for dance and theatre in our country that we will want to change the way in which policymakers think about our sector and then allocate funding to our sector as well. We want to go beyond simple relief funding for artists to providing projects through which their dignity can be affirmed through them earning income through the projects that we offer. So that's kind of what we are doing at the moment. I'm kind of quite excited by that.
I think it's very exciting as we hear it, and it's a 1-month institution like ours is almost just a 1-year institution. And as you said, artist organizations coming together, the solidarity evolving into these kind of solutions, and especially, you know, instead of asking everything from the government or from one point of power, but giving the power to the people, to the audiences, to the artists, and trying to figure out a solution through that is very valuable, I think. So we will continue, you know, following Stand. So let's go into our second round of questions, which can be kind of like the closing marks for this webinar for each and one of us. For example, maybe I want to start from the end right now and maybe give the speech to Mike again. Do you think Stand can be made larger and it can evolve the whole world? Do you see any other ways of, apart from your own country, connecting this kind of solidarity with other countries, with other institutions in the world? If I may ask.
Yes, I certainly hope so. In fact, the idea for Stand came from my, as I said at the beginning, there were these 4 productions that were basically canceled as a result of COVID of my plays. And although I wasn't financially responsible for them, I felt for the actors, for the director, and for the stage crew that lost income as a result. So I said, look, I'll go to my database of people who've come to support my work in the past, and I will raise money from them in anticipation of when these players will eventually come on board, and they'll buy tickets in advance, pretty much the kind of thing that you were talking about in your introduction. And so I went and raised money from my...
Gidip para aldım bireylerden ve son 4-5 aydır yardımcı olabildim aktörlere.
Simply to buy food, to pay for medical care, to pay for data. And so I thought, you know, why don't we take that principle and make it into what has now become STAND? And already with the emergence of STAND, we've had people from other parts of the continent saying, hey, can STAND extend its footprint kind of across the continent? And so I think that what this particular time has shown, not just with COVID-19, but also what has happened with the murder of George Floyd and you know, people becoming much more aware of institutional racism, the kinds of inequalities within the world have become much more paramount over this time. And I think the need for international solidarity is at an all-time high. You know, when you have a country like America, for example, withdrawing from multilateral forums, where it's all about make one country great again, or everybody having this narcissistic kind of attitudes towards nationalism and the like, it is a time that has kind of shown us, you know, COVID-19 has shown us it affects everyone in the same way as future crises are going to affect us all. Climate change, for example, something we haven't even begun to pay the attention that we need to. This COVID-19 has kind of shown us the existential threat to humanity posed by something which is invisible, which we are not taking sufficient care about. And I think climate change is going to do the same. And if we are not learning what it means as humanity to be in solidarity with each other now, where those of us who have are able to be modest and humble enough to say, actually, our futures are tied up with those who do not have at the moment. And it's in our collective interest to work together for the sake of common humanity. That is, I think, what COVID-19 is challenging us to come to understand and to begin to do it in a very practical way. Otherwise, you know, I fear for the future of us as a human race.
Yes, the question of future is very important when we are thinking about predominantly right now, our needs right now, but actually the future of the world, future of the arts is one of the main questions that should be in our heads right now. Thank you. So Hanan, maybe I can revert to you then for the question. Maybe I can say again, how can we build a solidarity culture in performing arts environment under emergency situations? What are your relevant experiences in your countries, if applicable to other countries? What can we do together? The main question is.
Maybe there is a lot of similarities with what just Mike has just said, because what I did also is digging into every piece of information and contact of my contacts, and so did 120 people in the theater relief group. Some has a lot of contacts, some less.
Tiyatro grubundan bazı insanların daha çok kontağı var, bazılarının daha çok, ama bu dayanışma dalgası.
And around the globe, and here comes the idea of the urgent need of international solidarity on all levels. And in our pre-meeting, I talked briefly about this international platform that we organized with Action of Hope Institute called the Requiem for Justice. It's within the program called the Landscape of Hope, where we believe that not only we need cross field and cross cultural to really go over the frontiers of our disciplines, but also over the geographic disciplines and over the domains, for example, to really be hand in hand humanitarians with theater people, with political thinkers, with critical journalists, all alternative really thinkers, and to form together a kind of international power. And in this platform, we really had for 3 days all along 6 hours at least, a bunch of the most interesting people in the world and really special and out of the box thinkers and artists, and the impact was really unbelievable. And this is one example. So if we think in that direction, I think we can realize a lot of actions. And also I want to recall that lately, for example, thanks also to this kind of strategic action, collective action between activists and artists, we succeeded for the first time in our struggle in 40 years in preventing those big thieves of our politicians to stop, not to go further in their what is called the Bishri Dam case. This dam was supposed to be built in the middle of a very beautiful plain where we have forests, we have pure rivers, the only spot which is still pure, and where people really live from a lot of personal and common resources. And this dam was going to spoil everything. And thanks to this solidarity, which lasted for years, lately during the revolution, we succeeded to stop the funding of this dam. And just a last mention, I have to say that I don't know if you know that lately there was a peace treaty between some of the Arab Gulf and Israel under the umbrella of the United States. This was another crisis that was really tragically added to our crisis, because from now and then many major funds, international funds, regional funds, and local funds will be really tied to the approval of the artists and the activists of being under the umbrella of that treaty. And it's a way to counter once more the freedom of artistic expression, which is really tragically jeopardized by the latest emergency military state that is now being practiced by the army in Lebanon. And just to finish by saying that, so my last word concerning our tragedy would not be, I quote, the rest in silence, unquote, as Hamlet said before he died. This was the last word said by Hamlet, but the rest. And here the word rest embodies two meanings: the pause, the response, and what the meaning of what is remaining. So the rest is not silence, but action. Brazilian director Augusto Boal says in his book, Theater of the Oppressed, the theater may not be revolutionary, but there is no doubt that it is a rehearsal for the revolution. Thank you.
Wow, those two last words are very, great, I think, in terms of the revolution being the rehearsal, the theater being the rehearsal of revolution, and also action instead of silence, and all of these ideas that maybe we can think about, change our thoughts towards the future in terms of thinking about these ideas is very important. So now I think it's Mikhail Durnankov for the last words, closing remarks, and the connection between your country and other countries and the international world in terms of solidarity.
Yeah, I don't have ready recipes. And I can join the words each Hanan and Mike said for how to survive this time. I think the one of the important factors now is the global of our general situation. For the first time in many years, the whole world in the same situation. And That means that we have common topics and context that we can share. Our mutual understanding will only grow with this situation. For example, I wrote a short Zoom play about the pandemia for Sweden and how it has already been staged. Now it already been staged in USA and will be staged in Mexico and so on and so on. It's a reason why. And I think, and because in each of these countries, this play doesn't look like something foreign, you know. This has never happened between us, as I remember situation. So we can't have journey, but at the same time, borders are becoming more transparent and translation problems are becoming less important. Of course, on the same time, it means a new round of globalization because the situation is global. Against the background of common problems, and our task, I think, in this situation is not to lose our identity of uniqueness and be ourselves. I think yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mikhail. The common points in our global pain, let's say. Kalina?
Yes, yeah, I won't repeat the things that the other speakers already said. I'm totally agree with Mike and Hanan and Mikhail. I would like just to stress another aspect because I think that the problem has two sides. One is the physical and creative survival of the artists, which is extremely important for us. But the other is the importance of the survival of audiences, because the situation is, well, we can all go online, but the physical the contact between the artist and the audience is something that we should think of all the time, because it will take us. Maybe it's easier now when everything is online. It is easier to access things that you would never access, the things that Hanan said. But on the other hand, if we lose the habit of the people to go to a theater, it will be very difficult to get them back. So I think that when we talk about solidarity, we should talk about the solidarity between artists and audiences, and to think of measures, how to work with them, how to involve them in the whole process of going through the COVID situation and beyond.
Yes, I think the question when we all talk about digitalization is the monetary aspect of digitalization is one of the main problems that we have, but also going back to stage, going back to, you know, performing face to face is another concern I think we have. So the last words by Arundhati Ghosh before we move on to question and answer, and the summarization points by Gökçe Dervişoğlu Okan'dan. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Yaseem. I agree with all the other panelists on what they said. So I won't repeat, I'll just add one more dimension to it. So Mike talked about the inequalities that binds us together. And suddenly, you know, the pandemic has brought to the fore the actual inequalities that are there. And then Hanan spoke about how our governments offer absolutely no security. I would actually add to that saying, we share one more thing in common, all of us, that we have governments that do not just not give us security, but are actively destroying our lives. We have governments that are selling our national resources to corporates. We have governments that are scaring us into giving data so that they can control our lives through the different ways. And you know, the whole FANGs approach, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. the monsters of the online world that we are all succumbing to in some way or the other, and thereby giving our personal data. And they're silencing every dissenting voice that is there. They're almost ripping out the heart of democracy in most of our countries. Some of them are doing it more quietly than others, and some of them are doing it as if nothing matters, not even their international reputation that some of us have actually been noticing in our country. So I would like to urge that let not the pandemic become a sort of smokescreen for the governments that, have always I just want to put it out there because it's something I have been thinking about, that COVID-19 is being used as a smokescreen for our government to increase the fear barometer, to increase our suspicion of each other, and to stop us from coming together. How wonderful it is for a fascist government when they can say that, oh, it's scary for you to be together more than 5 people in one place. They are actually gaining from COVID more than anything else. And we have to, I think, keep that in mind, because otherwise we are going to lose out on a lot of our solidarities. This is not the time to only talk about solidarities among artists. And as some of you have mentioned, and Hanan also spoke about, artists, activists, scientists, researchers, students, academics, anybody in the country, any citizen who's thinking about what their future is going to be and whether we are going to have the kind of polyphonic futures that we imagine for this world, and not just about humans, but about everything else that we care about, our animals, our natural resources, all of that, then our solidarity has to be across borders, across disciplines, across who we are. I want to, because I'm the last person to speak on this, I thought I'd like to end with a little video. It's 1.5 minutes, so it's not very long. In 2019, before our last general elections, over 3,000 artists across India, and you know how big India is, had gotten together in 11 cities to do something called Artists Unite. It was a 2-day festival that we did in these 11 places with thousands of people. Over 35,000 people came across, multidisciplinary event. It was against the politics of hate and violence. It was against the Hindutva right-wing government that we had. It was to bring the cultural and social and political fabric of this country, which has always been with all of us living together in harmony over centuries, to look at the essence of that. This short clip is from the first day that happened in Delhi, right outside the Red Fort. And you will get a sense of what solidarity meant on that day and what I hope we can look for in the future. So I'll just share this little thing, and I hope you'll be able to hear the music as well.
जो हमारे पुराने अड्डे होते हैं, शांति और
Can you hear it?
का माहौल होता था, उनको रिक्लेम करते हैं। चल बुलिया धरती ते चलिए उथे लभिए फिर पुराने जो ना तेरे ना हूं मेरे इथे अजकल पै गए कोर हनेरे मुड़ के ओयो रामा मलिए वही चल बुलिया धरती ते चलिए
We only hear Arundhati. We didn't see the video.
So sorry. I'll put in the link here for you. Yeah, really sorry about that. Yeah.
The music was very nice, but we couldn't see anything. So.
I'll put the link from YouTube in the chat box. Sorry. Yeah, it's a technical thing. Yeah.
We are moving into question and answer. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, there will be a short summary by Gökçe Dervişoğlu Okan'dan, and then wrap up by Serhan Ada, who's the head of the Performing Arts Department at Bilgi University. And we are also happy to collaborate with them. And now I would like to give my the speech to Gökçe, if she's around here. Okay. Great.
Yes, Yeşim, thank you very much for the word. And I would really love to thank all of the panelists, because there was such a kind of, coherent discussion, adding incrementally on each other's word. It is for me very easy to wrap up. And also special thanks for Arundhati for the, beginning remarks and beginning points that we can raise again. I'm a, let's say, critical management scholar at Istanbul Bilgi University, who has been working on cultural and creative industries in the last 15 years, and culture policy as well. So it is my pleasure to gather the common points, because it's very similar what we are trying to teach also on theoretical base, considering that the panelists are coming from different countries and different cultural policy backgrounds in an era, not only pandemic era, it is right now this period of time that we are experiencing together, that we have so many commonalities, is maybe a very good platform for future collaboration. So I would like to start with the introduction part. So everybody has actually mentioned about the ecosystem and some important facts which is influencing each country's profile and also international habits for collaboration. So the economic crisis, it's a global crisis. Similar political situations. Lebanon is maybe a very important example we have to follow, but we have very similar, rules and regulations for the oppression of freedom of speech or the statue of the artists in many countries, be it liberal countries, economically liberal countries, or centrally governed countries. So the economic and political situation is per se, and then nationalism in many countries that we are observing, what Mike has underlined the issue, what we are also working in Culture Policy Center very recently about this fact, not only in national borders, but also considered as a very important fact for diaspora, for migration groups, which is, for instance, very relevant for Turkish artists living in Germany right now. The ecological issues, as Mike very well underlined, understand. So very relevant, and how far we are talking and thinking about the future is quite important, because right now the circumstances are forcing us to think for a short period of time for immediate solutions. And these immediate solutions can cause also a change of strategic partnerships and solutions. So we have to think about that as well. And then after this, let's say, photo of the introduction, maybe referring to the bullet points that Arundhati has raised, the statue of the artist, freedom of expression, the statue as in the cultural policy, as in social security, as an entrepreneur, How countries are developing a discussion around these issues, and how lonely are artists in this discussion is an issue. The institutional challenges, also in Turkey, we don't have a specific type, legal type for not-for-profit institutions, not-for-profit bodies. So that brings us to a point to either serve for community and social interests or for profit. So we know also in the neoliberal and capital systems that the forms, models are shifting, and they are meeting in the middle. Also for-profit firms are expected to serve for the society, for the benefits, especially in times like this, or the social foundations or associations are expected to consider economic challenges. So this is also another point, the institutional change, and maybe the study of the fundraising, which was maybe 15, 20 years ago, very much bound institutional base. Right now it is shifting to the individual donors, individual solidarity cases, what we have seen is also among the examples. So individual giving and donating, and become an active audience, also sustaining the rules and regulations of participation, not a passive voice, but also a contributor to the creative work, has become an important issue. So the collective interest in general for humankind, for social good, is right now maybe our platform that we are discussing. So among good people, let's say, whatever it is, we are considering ourselves good people with dignity and solidarity and responsibility for the future. So this is a very important aspect, that we reconsider our resources we had already, but we were not very enthusiastic in sharing maybe. So all the ego management problems are aside in case of emergency, and we are serving for collaboration, cooperative bodies, clusters, and using the resources more efficiently. So not as the rule of the capitalism gives us, but maybe what kind of responsibility we are feeling, and shifting our attitudes towards this. So there were also very important points, as lately Arundhati has also raised, the responsibility of the government. So that is no excuse for forming that kind of infrastructure for the artists, for the audience, for all beneficiaries and stakeholders. So this is maybe this kind of period would serve for establishing that kind of structures, for building a holistic and sustainable ecosystem, as we are wishing from the start. And institutions like Tiyatro Kooperatifi, or all these art of initiatives in solidarity, or cultural operator initiatives, as Galina has mentioned, so that they were able to serve for this common interest. I would like to end, in the theory, when we're talking about cultural and creative industries, which is an important part on several developed countries, we are mentioning the importance of concentric circles, that in the circles, arts and independent art should really serve for that kind of, creative thinking, for questioning, for critical approach, so that in circles, it will benefit, it will also serve the whole economy as a creative production, as we are seeing in Turkish TV serials. So the very core element, even this creative production, is the actor base, is the production quality, is the quality of the story. And so in that way, economically also, it will serve in large circles. So I would like to really end here. I think there were some points which can be easily linked for Professor Ada to culture policy discussion. I would also really like to take the panelists who we are also a UNESCO chair, and as a ratified country, Turkey has ratified the Convention on Cultural Expressions. So I also would like to thank all panelists that they have raised the role and statue of the artist and cultural worker and the cultural operator and cultural and creative entrepreneur, so which are in the main discussion points of the convention. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Gökçe. That was even more than the summary, very good points at the end. So any question and answers or comments, anything before we close? I'm looking at the chat room and I don't see any questions, but if you have any questions or comments, please write at the chat.
Hello, I'm raising hand, but can I ask a question?
Oben Özkal, okay.
Hello, this is Oben Özkal. I work for Ataşehir Municipality of Istanbul as an art director. First of all, I'd like to thank all the partners that organizing this webinar as we go digital. Unfortunately, as we go digital in almost every part of our life, these kind of seminars, webinars are becoming so important. So I hope this will continue. My question is for the Tiyatro Kooperatifi representatives. As you, Mr. Yaşamoğlu, mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, you said Tiyatro Kooperatifi had a meeting with the Ministry of Arts about theater's plays going on digital. So how it's going to work? Can you give more information about it? How it's going to work on copyright issue, or how will you interrupt pirated broadcasting? So if you give more information about it, I'll be very happy. Thank you.
It was one of the suggestions of the many suggestions that we made to the Ministry of Culture and Arts, and actually inspired by the Romanian government's policy about digitalization projects open to theaters. And in the end, as you all know, you probably know also, there was a funding opened for theaters to convert their plays to digital platform, and the government supporting through that. But of course, as all speakers mentioned, there is a problem with copyright, because it's not like film, it's not like cinema, it's not like, it doesn't resemble anything. It's something that we have to think about again. And I think the value given to the performer, the writer, the director, the creator of the piece is problematic. And it was the case with our experience as independent theaters in Turkey, and I think it is the same for many people here, because a couple of people mentioned the same thing. Okay, any other questions? If you want to write a question or comment, you can write it in the chat. I think it was a very long and fruitful webinar for us, for all of us. I would like to thank all of the panelists. They were wonderful people from, different parts of the world. I had a great pleasure in listening to their solutions, ideas and imaginations for the future. And the closing remarks is, as I said, is by Serhan Ada, who's the head of the Department of Management of Performing Arts at Bilgi University. In his article in Agenda 21, entitled as The Dusk of Anthropocene, which was mentioned at the opening online event yesterday, Serhan Ada talks about Anthropocene by these words. It seems that Anthropocene has become a keyword that opens all doors to recognition. The word refers to how humans take center stage by trampling on all living things, which include not only nature and underground and above ground resources, but also bacteria and viruses. We are all currently witnessing the sinking of an era. So closing remarks in terms of what matters now and the world of performing arts by Sarhan Ada. Thank you.
Well, Yeşim, thank you very much. I'm so happy to be with yourselves today. And I would like to congratulate the Tiyatro Kooperatifi because of this initiative, gathering all these wonderful people. And we are considering ourselves as the Cultural Policy and Management Research Center at Bilgi, not as an advising partner, but as a sharing and content creating partner with the Tiyatro Kooperatifi. And I would try to explain why, because we don't stand somewhere above with our knowledge. We all share the same level of knowledge. First of all, one observation I would like to repeat here. We have 5 speakers today from 3 different continents. And it is good to see that the distinction we used to have in the past, like developed countries and developing countries, to say it smoothly, or underdeveloped countries, or we were having fights together with Hanan and Mike regarding the global South and the global North. And I see, for instance, Mihail from the so-called global North joining hands with ourselves, and the world is becoming one, which is the world itself that the neoliberals couldn't create as such. They created just differences and also lots of clivage around the world. So I think my first observation would be that we are all but one. On the second observation, I can tell that there is this sort of a distinction between the digital and the open air. Well, I think that the digital now has become much more familiar to all of us, and it's a must. But one day, I'm sure that the people who are now condemned in their rooms under more or less comfortable conditions to trying to be part of art and culture would be joyfully outside in the open air, enjoy the arts and culture and be part of it. So at this stage, we would need 2 things as priority versus something else. And these 2 priority being our ecological footprints when we are organizing things in the open air. And second, our public health risk evaluation thing, because sooner or later we have to keep in mind that we have gone to a crazy pace all around the world and ourselves included. So these things have evolved, and the world of the pre-COVID would not come back for sure. In the same framework, I would like also to stress one point which was also evident. I think Mike has said, government will never help or will never support, and they do not want to support us. Even if they would, I have doubt that they have the means to do it. So lingering for dressing with the new legislation or so is just loss of time. And we have to be very careful on that, that they won't be our, let's say, partners or point of reference for the future. We have to be in solidarity between our peers. And that is why when I have written this article called Between Precarity and Resilience, I sort of provided a sort of dialectic relationship between precarity and resilience. And I called my article as the Independent Republic of Culture with a big question mark. But when I followed our session of today, I can see lots of cases where the light is coming from different parts of the world with different practices to show us that the dynamics are there if we want or can look closely. Another point would be to consider Beirut as an epicenter for the upcoming world, because Beirut was the place of war first, corruption, then we see destruction, isolation, desolation, and so on. But on the other hand, we see that there is hope for solidarity, not only among the theater people, not only among the performing arts people, but all disciplines and all the precariat. So maybe we can suggest at the end of our session to IETM to start building from A to Z good cases gathered around the world. And I'm sure our friends and speakers of today can supply at least 10 or a dozen of good cases where people around the world could see and share with each other. So just to conclude, I would have 3 recommendations for all of us, maybe, which could help us for the future. I would start with act, not ask. Walk and not wait. Play together and not stay alone. And maybe I can finish with a famous word from a guy with a long beard once. Precarious from all around the world. We don't have anything to lose but our art. Thank you very much for all.
Okay, thank you. And this closes our session, our webinar, What Matters Now. So thank you all panelists and everyone who took part of it, who listened to it, and also IETM for giving us this opportunity to realize this panel. So see you in another panel then. Bye, or in real life.
Thank you.